This is Writers Not Writing, the show where you can get to know your favorite writers and soon-to-be favorite writers by listening to them confess to the ways they procrastinate. Thanks for procrastinating with us. I'm Benjamin Gorman, and the quiet guy behind the glass there is Doug the producer. I write novels and collections of poetry and stuff. Doug tries his best to make me sound better. And each week we have a secret word to listen for. If you catch it, you earn the right to take an extra break at the time of your choosing from whatever is stressing you out. From NotAPipePublishing, welcome to Writers Not Writing.
Today's secret word is posthumous.
If I take my time.
Hail and well met, readers and reviewers. Today's guest is Fish Nealman. Fish Nealman is a distinguished luminary in data-driven business decisions, is renowned for his insightful expertise shared through a series of technical books. With a global footprint spanning numerous countries, his profound insights enrich his debut fiction trilogy, the ESTEBAN Trilogy, seamlessly blending imagination and reality. As a seasoned professional, he has collaborated with organizations worldwide, unlocking the untapped potential of data. Through his masterful storytelling, readers are transported to captivating realms as his keen observations form the cornerstone of his transcendent tale. Welcome, Fish. I'm very glad to have you here today.
Thank you. It's great to be on. Thank you.
So, as the people who are looking can tell, we wear these wild costumes, but the folks who are, listening on the podcast don't know what we're wearing. So tell the podcast listeners what you chose to wear for your costume for today's show.
Well, to be perfectly honest, in honor of one of my main protagonists in my books, I'm wearing a complete priest suit, very dark black, white shirt, nice dog collar. And yeah, it looks great.
It does, yes. It is a great costume that it is totally functional and also iconic. When people see a priest on the street, they know, okay, that person has this particular job. I similarly have a costume where people see it and know the job. I am wearing a papal mitre and the full papal robes. And so if somebody saw me on the street, they would go, "Do we have a new pope?" Because I'm going for the full on pope thing. I am not, by the way, for listeners, I'm not the pope. So I've been very excited to have you on the show. Tell everybody about the ESTEBAN trilogy. You just came out with. Did the third book just drop, or is it coming out soon?
The third book comes out at the end of August. So
Yeah.
it's available for pre-order, and it's on the cusp of being released, and really excited about that. And yeah, the Esteban trilogy, it's a wonderful story about this person that becomes a priest. It's a multi-generational story, and it begins with his father's life, and then Esteban is born, the main protagonist, and it goes through the majority of his life. And the one Esteban is somewhat of an ordinary character. He has no direct superpowers as such. He's good with language, but other than that, nothing special. But he is challenged. He has a mental illness condition. He's schizophrenic. And the interesting part of that is that he's not aware of his schizophrenia. Nobody around him is aware of his schizophrenia. So the only person that ever knows he's schizophrenic is actually the reader. And while he's handicapped with this, it goes into a lot of the trials and tribulations he has about trying to find love and feel kind of whole in that way. But while he's still battling his mental illness, he's able to go on and do wonderful things in this world and leave behind an amazing legacy.
Oh, that sounds very cool. Yeah, and I am excited for, whenever we have a drop, whenever we've got a new book coming out, that's an exciting time. And at the same time, I read, I believe it was Douglas Copeland who called it the calm before the calm, where we get, so anxious and built up, and then the book comes out, and then the next day we're just checking Amazon. Yes, it's there, and the sales are, it's what they are on day one. So it is this anxiety producing time, and I want to say to all writers out there, it is a remarkable accomplishment, and a trilogy is a huge accomplishment. How long have you been working on this series?
The series goes back actually to approximately March 6th as an approximation, right? 2022.
Yeah.
That
Oh, so that's pretty quick.
well, that's when it started, and what led up to it was I have written a number of technical books over the years, computer based, creative thinking based books, and I was invited by somebody I know to collaborate in writing, co-authoring a fictional story. And I sent the person some samples of my writing, and he had seen some of it. But anyway, with these samples, he then came back about a week or so later and said, "I've decided against working with you." And
Oh,
it was like, so my wife then turned around and said, "Expletive him.
yeah.
Write your own book." That happened to be March 6th, 2022. That evening, I set out to write. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I knew the importance of just getting words on a page, and it kept blossoming and blossoming. And I spent every waking moment I had working on it. And about 6 months later, I had a trilogy.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's really, really fast. Yeah. My current trilogy, I finished the first draft of the third book this summer, and it won't come out until next summer. And that thing has taken me what, 6, 7 years. So yeah, that is a remarkable turnaround time. And I, I appreciate so much of the writing kind of journey is navigating the nose. It's somebody saying no at this point and saying I can go this other way. So yeah, going on your own, that's been remarkably successful to do that quickly and get those out there.
It was very interesting because I had no idea what my story arc was really going to be. There was a couple of things I wanted to keep in mind. I wanted to create endings that were great. There's
Yeah.
been so many books that I've read. The books have been absolutely stellar, and then the last 5 pages are such a letdown,
Yeah.
right? And so I wanted that magical last 5 pages type of thing that really made that journey worthwhile. So that was one thing I wanted to accomplish. I wanted to pull on aspects of how we experience other people in life, the human condition. I wanted that to come in. So there were a few things I wanted to achieve within the story. I had no idea what the ending was going to be, but I have read, how other authors say, let the characters talk to you, that they will tell you what they want to do. But at a personal level, I found that to be true. Within writing the story, it got to a point where the book told me it's now time to wrap things up. And so I didn't know what the overt ending was going to be, but I knew it was time to find that ending. And that was such a wonderful experience in writing.
Oh yeah, I love those moments. As you're writing, you realize the best way for this to end would be. How do I get there? But when you have that little moment of insight where you go, what would be the best possible ending? And you're right. A lot of times it's the circumstances of the story have led to that moment of kind of revelation where you go, oh yeah, this is how it has to, wrap up. Even if
so
that's, tragic, it's still,
right.
this is the ending I've got to get to.
So even in the Esteban story, again, because I didn't have this ending in mind, that because Esteban isn't this phenomenal character within it, the story somewhat follows like the hero's journey type of trope, but it kind of breaks that because Esteban is never motivated to go do something. But through his career, through happenstance and everything, he ends up at one point in the third book, he's elected by the College of Cardinals to be the next pope.
Ah,
And that could be the magical ending of the book, that yes, he's the pinnacle, except he goes and says, no, I don't want the job.
yeah.
So the ending then was, because it didn't feel right that was the ending. So it's, no, I don't want to be Pope. Go find somebody else. And so then I needed then an ending after that ending. And so
Yes,
it was
yes.
interesting.
I have thoroughly enjoyed kind of messing with my reader a little bit with the ending of my own trilogy, where, it builds to what you think is the cliche climactic kind of battle scene. And then that's by no means the end because, I wanted to break the trope of, and then they defeat the big bad and it's over. Like, no, that's not the way life ends. And so, yeah, that then they come home and something that's seemingly innocuous ends up being a lot more significant than beating a monster.
Yes.
Yeah. So I look forward to that. That'll be fun. The twist there at the end. So when you've been writing incredibly quickly, producing all this, what has been pulling you away from your writing lately in terms of the things that are distracting you in the world of pop culture, that kind of thing?
Um, I'm not s- th- my normal regular job, that is highly distracting. On the normal week on that is probably a 60 to 70 hour work week. And it's incredibly demanding. The only difference in the last few years is, well, especially since COVID, I used to travel very heavily internationally. And since COVID, that came to a sudden halt, hasn't
Yeah.
picked up, something that I'm happy about, being able to stay at home and everything. And I think that in large part then has given me some extra hours. One of the things that I have honestly found in writing fiction versus the nonfiction I'd previously written, when I was writing nonfiction, I had created a mentality that I had to be able to set aside several hours because I had to kind of get back into this really concentrated effort of writing something very challenging, from a technical standpoint, and getting it out. And I needed these huge blocks. But with the fiction, I told myself I didn't not to fall into that trap that had to have these huge blocks of time, because that potentially would set me on a course that would make it very difficult to finish. And I literally got into the habit that even if I only had 3 minutes, 4 minutes, I'll just take that, put some words down, go on to what I had to do, and then come back and write it. So with writing fiction, I really tried to shift my mental approach to writing and try to find time within the day, no matter how small a slice it is, to take advantage of that and spend that time on the creative process of storytelling.
Yeah. Do you think how did that affect the story itself? Did it keep it lighter?
The story, there is humor within the story, but there's also a number of serious elements
Oh,
to that. I think it allowed me certainly to think about the story and change. One of the things I did that, um, because I wanted to do a few things a little bit differently, one of the things I started out doing was, uh, when I wrote the trilogy, it ended up being 253 chapters. But it was these chapters that I ended up calling a micro chapter,
hmm.
a vignette type of thing. And so within the writing process, because I was writing these vignettes, it meant I almost had like then a jigsaw puzzle, and I could shift these vignettes because I didn't have these hardcore chapters. And so what I was able to do is I could take these 253 micro stories, vignettes, arrange them, and then on piecing the puzzle together, just put in the linkage vocabulary to go from one to the other, and that worked. So, I would say on it, what I was fortunate to get into this micro chapter mentality, and that really helped because I only had to think about small slices and then worry later on about how do these things thread.
Yeah. How did you organize them? Did you find yourself creating a spreadsheet? I totally have discovered the spreadsheet of chapter summaries because I have to go, you know what? It would actually be better if 11 were before 9. Like, how do I renumber them all? So how did you keep them all, together in your head, or did you just produce them and then go, what would be the right one to put next and put in the document? How did you organize those?
The story was quite linear in many respects.
Oh, and I lost the sound there a little bit. Let's see. Let's go back. But the last thing, can I hear you now? No, I'm not getting any sound now.
Oh
Oh, and there
gosh,
you
let
go.
me.
Now you're back.
Oh,
Oh, nope, it might be my internet connection. So let me see. Sometimes if I turn off my phone Wi-Fi, that helps. So that might be my connection is not great. See if that
if
improves
you
things.
want, I can take the AirPods out.
Nope, nope, I can hear you clearly now. So yeah, you said
Okay.
the story was quite linear in many respects.
It, the story was quite linear in many respects, and what I was then finding out was how I could link certain things together. That I started creating um, a story about how one cardinal in Rome had sent somebody with an attitude out to be a missionary in the Amazon, and he ends up getting eaten and killed and everything. And within that, I was then able to tie that back to one of my other characters earlier on and kind of have all these linkages. So I didn't need to as much juggle the chapters as much I could juggle the links between what was happening to characters. So it was nice in many respects that I didn't have to pre-think what those links were, but because as I was writing, obviously I had in the back of my mind what was happening with these characters, that later on I could say, oh,
Mhm.
I can go back, revisit that, add this little thing in so I tee up when something nasty happens. I've
Yes,
got the associations.
that's so rewarding for the reader too. I teach my creative writing students that, that those foreshadowing elements are a way of saying to the reader, you are included. I see you. We are, we are part of a community because you get it. And so, we can go back and create these little clues, or because we know the story, we can say, I see where this is going. And then the reader gets to feel like, oh, I got it. I am included because I remember that thing too. So yeah, that's that. I love those moments in a story where you're like, oh, that wasn't a one-off. That actually did turn out to matter, you know?
Right. And
Um,
in fact, a book I've just finished that I hope will be published next year called Born Posthumous. It's a non-linear story, so it starts out with something that happens towards the end in the first chapter, but then chapter two starts out at the very earliest parts. And so, in writing these parallel things about the now versus the future and things, so I could work in some of the connections on things, but again, with that, without having the strict discipline to know everything that was going to happen, I could write things towards physically the end of the book, and I would revisit the beginnings of the book to put in certain names and everything. And I do like the creative aspect of revisiting. I've certainly read biographies of a lot of authors and listened to the way they approach, and about certain authors, they don't feel their work needs much editing because their grammar is so perfect, and that they
yeah.
think out their stories so well that they write everything out, and it comes out polished on the first draft almost. And what I think one of the things I love most about the writing is actually the editing. I love
Yeah.
going back and adding layers onto the cake.
Yeah.
So I enjoy that part quite a
Yeah,
lot.
I certainly am not one of those people where the first draft is the last draft. There's a lot of work left to be done. And I think that I make a big distinction between revision and editing. So there's the moving giant chunks around and discovering what needs to be in the story earlier, and then how do you provide that continuity? And then there's the, grammar and mechanics stuff. And both are very much necessary for me. The first draft is not a polished draft by any means. But yeah, I
Yeah,
agree. I think that part can be a lot of fun. Now it's, you've got all the pieces and now it's a puzzle. How am I going to, lay this out for the reader? So yeah, I absolutely have that same experience.
yeah, and I've even seen with certain art, especially famous artists from 200, 300 years ago, that in modern day times, like when they X-ray the paintings to see the layers and everything, that then they end up, because of that, they're able to see in charcoal other characters that the was in the initial draft, but then get painted over. So even phenomenal artists, almost whether it's writing, painting, pictures, whatever it is, that you you don't have to create that final version from the first version. And so
Yeah.
letting the ability, your one's creative ability, however it was to manifest, manifest over time and through iteration and so on. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's valuable. I would prefer to, certainly to work with somebody who is open to that and open to those changes. I worry that somebody who says, "Oh, my first draft is the final draft," that person's probably pretty difficult to work with. If you say, there are some changes we could make, and this could be really cool. No, I do this all on my own. Like, that's a real opportunity for collaboration there too, to say, "Oh, you're right. I see the character who needs to be painted over." Let's, like that is part of the process.
yes.
So, what's something that has been grabbing your attention in terms of a hobby when you're not writing? I can see the guitars behind you. What else? What else pulls you away from this work?
Uh, I do like to go and see a lot of live bands. Um, I live in a smallish town, and they have a smallish theater where live bands will come. And within the smallish theater, it probably would hold less than 100 people or so. And I, with my wife, usually try to get to a show early, and we can sit up front. And so I really enjoy when you go and watch people that are really good at their craft,
Yeah.
and when you can literally see the whites of their eyes. Um, we go and see blues musicians, a lot of retro bands, a lot of tribute type of acts, all different genres of music. And I get really captivated to see people that play the guitar much better than I do, um, make it look so effortless. I really enjoy that type of thing.
Well, and I was just talking with somebody about this recently. There's making it look effortless, but really what they're doing is practicing all the time. I mean, if they're up on a stage, it's putting in the hours. And yeah, I love seeing somebody who has mastered their craft by playing small clubs in small towns over and over. So often a tribute band will come through. I live in a small town too, and we'll get these bands for, out in the park for a fair or a festival or something, and they're remarkably talented. And then I have to remind myself that's because they play every night. They've really honed their craft.
Well, honestly, one of the things too is that with the guitar too, I personally find keeping in time a huge challenge for me. So one of the things, even with our five senses, right? So obviously I wear glasses. So that means my vision is not necessarily perfect. So that means I don't necessarily see everything.
Right.
I know that like when you go to an elevator or something and what floors and there may be a braille sign underneath it. If I touch the braille sign for whatever reason, I can't feel the braille. So I know from a touch standpoint, I'm missing something. So I know I'm missing something from my sight. I know I'm missing something from the touch. Um, the first time I realized my sense of smell was diminished was I was in Boston and I was going over some bridge and I see all these people walking towards me and they're all kind of covering their face because of the smell. And I'm not smelling anything at all. And so I could see by that my sense of smell was not up to the level of some other people. Inherently, I know because I have a lack, my sense of smell is lacking. It means my sense of taste has to be
Mhm.
lacking because those are associated. And my wife is always say to me, "What are you deaf? You can't hear me." So I'm obviously not hearing everything. And then, so I created a phrase for that in the Born Posthumous book called partial senses, and I played off of that. And so I know it carries over like into the guitar work that there's certain inner feelings or something that aren't necessarily as fine-tuned as others. Like when you go and see those stellar musicians on stage, and through that practice, yes, but you can see that there is a groove, there is a feeling, there is something beyond the senses that they've tapped into, and it's emanating from what they're doing for the audience to appreciate and everything. And I seem to lack that too.
Yes.
uh,
Well, the reason I was beaming when you were talking about the lack of smell, I'm not laughing at you. I am right there with you. I'm an anosmiac. I do not have a sense of smell. It was diminished when I was very young due to allergies, and so I can hardly smell anything. I can remember the times when I have smelled things, and it is not pleasant smells. I I remember the smells of the bathrooms in, pre-19, in the 90s, in the Grand Central Station bathrooms in New York. Really awful, awful smells. And I would
Right,
be like, everybody else would be like gagging, and I'd be going, I'm aware of a smell. Like, and my wife has, a very fine-tuned sense of smell, and so she is into like scented candles and that kind of thing. And I have no concept of why somebody would spend money on a scented candle, because they don't smell like anything to me. So in my writing, as a little joke for people who know me very well, I have, only in one trilogy. I haven't done this career wide, but in this last series of books, whenever I have to describe a smell, I describe it with a simile to a sound or a texture or something else, because I don't know what things sound like. So I'll say, oh, and it smelled like this thing sounds. It smells like this thing feels.
right.
Because, and friends of mine are like, I got it. Because you don't know what it smells like. I have no idea what anything smells like based on, other than what I've read of other people's descriptions of smells. So yeah, I like that, the half sense, but just not quite enough information coming in from the outside world to provide that kind of experience.
And that's where I think the writing comes in as well, is that while I can identify with the fact my senses may not be at the same level as other people, and my guitar playing is definitely not at the same level as other people, I can put words on paper and I can refine those words, and now I can see something.
Yes.
And because it's words on paper as such, it's then external to me at
Hmm.
that point. So therefore, it can be expressive. It can be statements of sentiment. It can be even like you're saying with the smell, wacky associations to something else that one might experience. That I feel like I can make up for diminished senses elsewhere and have them lay on paper where I can then read them and potentially enjoy them from that standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah, that's and that ability to refine, to say I don't need to perform, perfectly on stage in front of 500 people. I am a writer. I get the opportunity to go back and clean this up before anybody ever sees it, and polish it to the point where now it is ready for an audience. Is a
Yeah,
luxury we should take advantage of.
absolutely.
So one of the questions I always ask folks is, oh no, before I get to that, sorry, I'll clip that. What is something that has been taking you away from your work in terms of the news, in terms of what's been going on in the world, or the sciences, in terms of what you've come across lately that distracted you?
I think there's so many things that are going on in the world as a whole that you would think in the 21st century that in a civilized society as a whole that there would be more understanding and more things that are settled. And it seems that we want to revert to too much divisiveness. Um, it's not that that's necessarily as distracting, but it's things that I take and in my stories, like we obviously in the beginning spoke about Esteban. I did mention the Born Posthumous. Another book I've got coming out towards the end of the year is one called The Flat Tire, and within that it gets into it picks up on a number of divisive things that are happening within the US, and it gets to a part where there's people within the US that they're trying to create a redeclaration of independence.
Hmm.
Um, and part of the positioning of that is that when the original Declaration of Independence was created, it was written from a basis of what we were against. In other words, King George,
Right.
and then writing around something that you want based on something that you don't want. And then within this redeclaration, it was took the opposite, that it had as its anchor root what it is we want. and
Yeah.
build from that, and just trying to take that. And it was dropped on trying to have more unification, more understanding from a society as a whole. It's not that people aren't without their own personal liberties to think and act as they want, but it, I think, needs to be in some way in tolerance to the fact that you want to have all of these variations. It's not about one set of behaviors that rule everything and or dominate everything, but rather, sure, you can be different in however different manifests within you, but then allow that to coexist within others. And so it delves into that. And so with this Redeclaration of Independence, the main characters within that. So I do have one of the characters from the Esteban story come over. So it's a side-quel story. Yeah. Instead of a prequel or a sequel, it's a side-quel carrying that. So I've got a cardinal in there. I have a Jewish rabbi. I have an atheist in there. I have a Muslim imam in there. I have some indigenous Americans within there. So I got this whole potpourri of things. The flat tire, the name of it comes from one of the things about humans, that it's a shared experience that we all have. So while we do have different belief systems and things, you end up finding that in living life, no matter what you think or believe or do, you end up having the same experiences as everybody else. And so that should be some type of clue as to harmony and coexistence and all of these things. So the distractions are going on in the world. It just becomes ideas for writing.
Yeah, exactly. Have you heard of Karl Popper's Paradox of Tolerance?
I have not.
I love this. So Karl Popper, English philosopher from the 1920s, 30s, kind of at his height, had this insight that if we, in kind of the public square, say we will tolerate anything, and we tolerate a group of people who say, I refuse to tolerate X group of people, they cannot exist, right? Then we cede a portion of society, civil discourse to intolerance, and that group will slowly take over the sphere, right? And so it is in the paradox is, in the name of tolerance, it is acceptable to be intolerant of intolerance. We have to be able to say, this is outside of the bounds of a tolerant society, because this idea you have that this group of people, shouldn't exist, needs to be excised, needs to be slaughtered, whatever, that, rather than people saying, hey, you said you were so tolerant, so you need to accept all beliefs. No, there are certain beliefs that are intolerant, that do not, function within a tolerant society. And so the paradox is, to promote a tolerant society, we do have to be intolerant of certain kinds of intolerance. And that I found that to be very helpful when people are saying, but shouldn't anybody be able to, believe whatever they want? Yes, but if their beliefs are that certain people shouldn't be able to exist, that can't function within a pluralistic society. So yeah,
I think
it's worth checking out. Karl Popper, The Paradox of Intolerance.
Yeah, and I think it's always a conundrum when you look at a lot of philosophies like that. That there's always the observation that you can't handle the negative aspects of that as an extreme. I think when you look at life, just eating food, one of the things that ends up being the best for you is like a balanced diet.
Yeah.
Right. That there's extremes in eating are not overly going to be good for the long term. I think when you look at a lot of other things in life, extremes once in a while maybe, but overall you can see that they don't work. So whether it's the weather, climate, and things, areas of the planet that have extreme weather, they aren't as diverse as things that are more balanced. I think there's an inherent thing in biology that gets to you may not have everything you want, but if you can get more to something that's balanced, and I'm not really finding what the edges of that balance are, but when you get into extremism on things and like that intolerance aspect of it is because you're trying to test out the edges, and I think that's always going to be brittle.
Yeah. I like the food analogy. If we get to the point where it's all incredibly spicy or incredibly bitter or incredibly sweet, that's not going to provide the kind of palate anyone wants. So excellent. Well, we're gonna go to our break, and when we come back, I'm gonna ask you what you've been daydreaming about lately. Special announcement time. NotAPipePublishing has always been committed to helping authors and readers find one another. Well, the show, which is all about helping readers get to know writers, just hit a milestone: 10,000 views on YouTube. So to celebrate, instead of charging authors to advertise their books on the show, I'm going to run your ads for free throughout 2024. If you want to make a 30 to 60 second video about your book, let folks know what it's about and where to find it, and don't forget your name and the title. I'll run 1 or 2 of those in our ad spot each week. Just send an MP4 file to the NotAPipe email address in the show notes. Let's fix up some readers and authors into reader relationships. 2024. More readers, more writers, more books.
Cold Rising. Algo and their team of enforcers take on the underbelly of Geneva megacity before being sent on a mission to Mars, a cesspit of corporate exploitation. Suan, a child laborer, must turn the heart of Agent Algo, while the fate of Mars, her friends, and her family hang in the balance. Cold Rising. Cold Rush novella, available now on Amazon. No one wants to live in a country ruled by wizards, unless the alternative is worse. Peter Watts, author of Blindside, says, a near-perfect blend of implacable horror, gallows humor, and ecological apocalypse. Nick Namatis, author of The Second Shooter, says, relentlessly radical and often hilarious. Cascade, Book 1 in the Sleep of Reason trilogy, by Rachel A. Rosen. Available now at bookshop.org, Apple Books, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and at bppress.ca.
I'm realizing I need to do a better job of telling folks this. People can't know what we refuse to share. I'm a big fan of audiobooks. I've been doing a ton of work in my yard, and audiobooks have been my constant companions throughout. I know there are some people who say reading an audiobook doesn't count as reading. They are wrong. Reading with your ears requires some of the same skills as reading with your eyes, and some distinct skills, but it's still creating meaning from a text, and it counts. I have 5 of my books out in audiobook, on Audible and Amazon. The Convention of Fiends, Book 1, Don't Read This Book, and Book 2, You Were Warned. Corporate High School is narrated by Crystal Kay, and she did an amazing job. I narrated The Digital Storm with some cool voice changer software for some of the characters, so that sounds like a bit of an ensemble. And I recorded one of my collections of poetry, This Uneven Universe, as a gift for my wife Crystal, who wanted to be able to listen to it while driving. So if audiobooks are a way you enjoy reading, check those out. And if you like them, let me know, readers and reviewers.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm here with Fish Nealman. And Fish, lately, what have you been daydreaming about?
I have been daydreaming about writing more writing. I think one of the aspects of that is just trying to get into an aspect where I can do more writing and really then even more research on things. I would certainly like to be able to see if there are avenues to take my writing to another level. I think whatever one does, and we were talking earlier about musicians and how you get good is through practice. So writing is no different. There are certainly different writing styles. I had I mentioned earlier, like in the Born Posthumous, I tried writing a non-linear story because Esteban was very linear. So I was just trying some different things. Most
What a
of my
great
stories,
title, by the way. Born Posthumous is that's a very cool title.
thank you. I most of the book, all the books I've written so far have ended up being literary fiction because I can't find the genre that they really should be in, and so I would like to explore specific type of genres. Writing is such a huge canvas between different story tropes, between different genres, between different writing styles. And I just see out there that there is so much to learn, and it'll be more than what I can consume within the rest of my
Right.
life.
Yeah.
Which therefore means, within that daydreaming, all the time I've got left, it never has to get boring or unadventurous or anything like that because there's always something more to go and strive for.
Yeah, I remember an uncle of mine once said to me, "How do you come up with ideas? Do you ever worry you're going to run out of ideas for stories?" And I had to say, "Oh no, I'm going to run out of time long before I run out of ideas for stories. Like I have files of ideas. Here's a novel I would like to write someday, and I will never get through all of them." So yeah, I absolutely hear that. And what a good problem to have.
Yes. So what's one of your stories that you probably won't get to write?
Won't get to write. Oh, that's yeah. So I started a science fiction mystery, and I've not written detective story kind of fiction, and I set it on a spaceship that is traveling to Enceladus, one of the moons of Saturn, and so it creates that like people on a train kind of feel they're all contained, and this person who is not normally a detective, but he's on this voyage, and we get enough backstory to understand why he would actually be a good detective, but that's not his his particular training. And there's a murder, and has to figure out how this whole thing is going on. But it was during the lockdowns, and I was very ambitious. I was going to write, I had multiple books I was going to write during the lockdowns, and like many people, my plans for all of my accomplishments during the lockdowns did not pan out. And this one, and so what I thought would make it interesting is, what if these people are on this spaceship and there is a plague, a virus that is spreading, and so everyone is locked in their cabins, and that provides the means. And then as I got further into the story, I went, I am just not in the headspace to be writing about people locked in their rooms while I am locked in my house during a global pandemic. I thought it would be a good idea, but I don't want to experience it. And if I don't want to experience it, probably no reader out there wants to be reading about being trapped in a spaceship while they are trapped in their house. And so I set it aside. So I've got about half a mystery story set on a spaceship that maybe someday I'll come back to. We'll see. But I'll plan it for the 50-year mark between our century pandemics, instead of doing it during during a pandemic.
But at least from that, you've got the experiential side of things, that you knew what it was like in coming out,
Yes.
that sense of relief, the caution that you have. Can I trust you that you aren't going to give me that virus back? And then becoming very lackadaisical to where I now don't care.
Right. Well, and a lot of the story hinged on, who are the essential workers? The essential workers get to leave their rooms. That provides, times and opportunities when people are moving around the ship. And, during the lockdowns, we all kind of experienced that tension of, I know I should be in my house, but I also know I need to go to the grocery store, and I am having this interaction with the, postal worker and the Amazon delivery guy. And so, that sense of being connected and also disconnected from the people around us could make for a really interesting mystery. Like, who are my suspects? Who are the people who were out of their rooms at the following times? So maybe it's something that I'll come back to at some point.
But I told you that I live in a small town. So one of the shops in town, so the lady sells scented candles and things of that nature. During the lockdown and everything, she stocked a few rolls of toilet paper, an essential item. So she was able to restate her business as an essential business
with just a
and
little
open
bit of
up.
toilet paper.
So one of the things that you can consider is about how people abuse
Oh yeah,
rules.
absolutely. Well, my wife's experience was really interesting during the lockdowns. At the time, she owns a retail store now that would have been one of the ones that would have been closed down. She owns a Lego store. But during the lockdown, she was managing a restaurant. And the lockdowns were what got her out of the restaurant industry entirely, because it was a pretty awful experience. I think a lot of people who worked in the kind of food service sector had a very bad experience because people would take out their frustration on the people that they had to interact with who weren't the people in their homes. And so the amount of abuse that she took during that time, where people were just pretty awful to food service folks. And so that was absolutely an insight that I took into the writing is, people when they are tense and confined and then they get to meet with somebody, instead of their best selves coming out, sometimes their worst selves come out, when they're finally able to talk to a human. Rather than being human, we manifest the worst sides of ourselves. So I always like to ask, this is a weird question, I know, but it's a fun one to ask authors as kind of a Rorschach to get to know you as a human. So if you were living in a universe other than our own, let's say the Star Trek universe, what would be your species and your role in that in that Star Trek universe?
Gosh, that's really something to make the mind ponder. I do find it, interesting in, like, especially in the Star Trek thing, when you do go to other planets or encounter other things midway through the universe, everybody seems to have 2 legs and 2 arms.
Right.
In
Yeah, that's right.
general type thing, or a quirky type of rock. So I think it's just going to be probably in a physical form. Probably, it's just going to be in a physical form like we have now. And some of my abilities will be what I'm lacking that I mentioned earlier. That I'll be able to see everything. I'll be able to hear everything. I'll be able to taste and smell, and all the things that my earthly incarnation doesn't have.
Yes. There is that one species, I can't remember what they were called. Oh gosh, was her name It wasn't Diana. Yeah, I think it was Diana, who also are telepathic. So they have another sense beyond our own. I'm not sure I would want that. Would you want the ability to have a sixth sense and actually read people's minds, or would that be too much information?
I think I just wouldn't want the inverse, that knowing that you could never have a private thought
Yeah.
is like, ugh.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So you've got the book coming out in when did you say it's coming out soon, right? It's coming out in
the end of the month.
Oh, it is the end of August. Okay, yeah. So folks, keep an eye out for that. And where can folks find out more about you online?
I do have a website. It's tales.fish, so TALES.fish, FISH. So as a little play on words and everything.
Yeah.
So that's the website. The books are available everywhere you can get a book, in a store or online. It's hard copy, paperback, audio, and ebook. So available in everything. So that's really exciting and really accessible. Well, some of the very quickly, if I may, some of the interesting aspects of it's a very multicultural story. Esteban himself is his father's American, but his mother's Mexican, so he's more on as much the Hispanic side. But one of the things I did not realize until after I had published the first book, my second book, it starts out. It takes place 3 major settings. One is it's in Mexico. The second one is in Southwest India, and the third one is in Macau, China. And with the characters I have, it is completely multicultural. They're, from a Caucasian experience of things, there aren't any. And so I never set out to overtly write a multicultural aspect of things, but it's ended up being something that's quite broad, a lot of universal things going on. I attribute that in part to a lot of the work that I've been fortunate to have internationally.
Yes.
And it's worked into my stories. And so I think that's an exciting part. So it means that, so while the books are available wherever you get books from, but it's also available internationally. And so I think there are international elements that people outside of America would also identify with, and hopefully feel the story resonates with them as well.
I love that. I love when a book has lots of different settings around the world, because it is affording me a vacation as well. This is not just set in one place that is very familiar to me, but my current trilogy came about because I was traveling through Europe, and I went, these would be excellent settings for this story. And then I got to travel to Costa Rica, and then this last year I got to travel to Southeast Asia, and so I set a bunch of it in Vietnam and Cambodia, and it was really wonderful to get to take readers with me and say, this is what it actually feels like to be on this small street in Limerick in Ireland. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. I look forward to checking that out myself. So who would be a recommendation for another guest I should have on this show?
There's a friend I have. He now lives in France, and he's written some fictional business books, or set in a business setting, but also he's written with historical fiction, specifically set around the Civil War time. His name is Stephen Romaine. I think he would be an excellent guest.
Oh, Stephen Romaine. Okay, I will reach out. And what is on your to be read pile right now? What are you looking forward to checking out next?
I just finished two books, one called 16 Months and one called 30 Years. Those books were written by the same person. 16 Months was depiction of their journey backpacking in the Far East and Australia, spending that. And the 30 Years was a recount of their working career. But at the moment, I'm in some research for some of my work. I'm reading a lot of philosophers, and I'm reading a book called The Rebel by Albert Camus.
Oh, yeah.
So, looking to see what insights he has about what, breaks a person.
Yes. I love Camus. I did some academic work on the myth of Sisyphus when I was in college, and I love the plague and the stranger. So yeah, highly recommend. In fact, take the time to read the last 5 pages of the myth of Sisyphus. Well, the first 3 and the last 5. The middle of the book is his kind of recounting of how this conclusion has come to him through all of philosophy, and it's pretty dry. But the beginning is the point he's kind of teeing up, and then the very end is the conclusion, is one of the most beautiful pieces of philosophical writing I have ever come across, is the last 5 pages of the myth of Sisyphus. So highly recommend. Yes, Camus is one of the all-time greats. That's
right,
excellent. Well, there's some folks I need to thank before we get to our sign off. Thanks to the artist Max Oakland, who reached out and provided one of his songs for our intro song, I Prefer the Dusk. Let Max know you like it by following him on Twitter at Max Oakland with 3 Ds. And thanks to Halisna CCO for their song Kids for the ad break. If you're in a band and you'd like your song used on the show, I'd love to highlight a listener's work like Max's song, so email me about that. Thanks to Doug, the producer, for making this show sound good and taking the blame when it doesn't. And I cannot forget to mention, Writers Not Writing is a production of NotAPipePublishing. So please go to NotAPipePublishing.com and check out the amazing books written by writers who didn't procrastinate too much. If you like this show, rate and review it wherever you found it. Please check out Fish's ESTEBAN Trilogy. Tell a friend about it. Even a short review and a single click on that 5th star makes a huge difference. So make Fish's day. Click on that 5th star and tell folks why you liked it. And similarly for this show, click on that thumbs up. That really would make a big difference. Tell a friend that you enjoy this show. Fish and I want you to remember 3 things this week. Fish, what is your advice for everybody going into their week?
Just put positive energy out there. That does so much for yourself and those around you. There's people are potentially limited where they live, what they do for in life, and everything about what they might be able to physically do in a lot of things. But the one thing you can always do is just exert good energy and try to put the world a better place through that energy.
Excellent. And I always say to folks, a book without spaces would be gibberish, and our lives need spaces too. So don't ignore the spaces. And then lastly, no matter how much you procrastinate, Fish and I are still proud of you.